data with a lot of value. People make a lot of sense in that case. But I don't think it's just that people are shifting away from doing unstructured data or shifting away from doing some of that in the code. I think they're realizing that when you put all that together, when you co-locate that data, there are all kinds of new opportunities, right? So SQL is great for some of those problems, and it's not so great for others. So you do graph processing or whatever is the right approach there, right? But storing all that together has a lot of value instead of having to have some here and some there, and you end up spending time moving your data back and forth when you want to join it and all those pieces. So I actually expect I think you're right. So part of the reason we're seeing SQL be hot now is because people with money want SQL, right? But I actually think that's a great thing for Hadoop because as Hadoop comes into these places where they will start with SQL because that is what they know, that's what they've been doing for 20 years, they'll just, as that happens, what we see happening is people discover more and more, oh look, now that I have this thing, I can do all this other stuff I never dreamed possible. So it's almost like SQL becomes the entry point for them rather than the end point.
Yeah, I think, I think unlike maybe the legacy vendors here, I don't think people want to go back 10 years in time. I think we're actually, this is about taking it kind of step to the next step. And really what's happened is Hadoop has become kind of the pervasive big data platform where companies have all their data in this platform. And doing a lot of things with it, like just what you mentioned, right? They're doing machine learning, they're doing recommendations, they're doing BI. And I think one of the things people want to do naturally is they want to interactively explore that data. They want to, look at that log file of event data that's come in and say, show me how many, or give me all the records that were in error and happened in the last day in my data center in San Jose. So I think it's just natural that people want to have that kind of ability to do an interactive query on that data. But I definitely don't think it's about taking just database technology and kind of putting it on Hadoop. I think it's a lot more than that.
I'll kind of agree with that. I think what's happening here is there's this whole pattern of information production that's coming in. As you look at data like machine exhaust or web logs, it's inherently unstructured, but there's some part of it that is structured that you want to get at. And once you get at it, you will do various things, including a lot of SQL processing, but not limited to it. And at the end of the day, at each stage, the intermediate data you get itself becomes grist for another phase of the production life cycle. By the way, there's one other reason why SQL on Hadoop is, I think, gathering some attention. Us older SQL guys want to be young. Okay, I think that's pretty much you're in sync. But technically, I didn't see a whole lot of agreement. I saw some elements. It seemed that a lot of people were clear that they wanted to bypass MapReduce, translation into MapReduce, and build native SQL implementation. I also saw Yarn mentioned in a number of slides, right? By the way, while I didn't mention Yarn explicitly, I did. We are also using Yarn. There's still a fair amount of diversity in the technical approaches represented at this table. So I'd like to see what people have to say on this. Why are people not satisfied with the old implementation of Hive and Pig? One obvious answer would seem to be interactivity. But is that it? If you were concerned solely with batch processing, would you settle for the old implementation? What do people think? How?
No. So actually, you referenced me working on Pig. From the beginning of working on Pig, I remember having discussions with the MapReduce guys and saying, we need to make changes to this. This isn't the right paradigm for what we're trying to do. MapReduce is a great paradigm for a certain set of things, but it's not, for any of you who've written code to implement joins in MapReduce, which I've done a number of times now, it's not a natural fit, right? You're cramming a square peg in a round hole there. And so it's not just about interactivity. Certainly interactivity is part of it, and that's why we're working on Pez to build an execution engine that is the right basis for Pig and Hive and those kinds of things, right? But that's not the only piece. There's also things about, you want an operator set in your execution engine that's going to match what your process is trying to do. You want joins and unions and all those things to be natural fit into your execution layer.
Do others want to speak on this?
I'd say the first thing is, even with something like Hive, we have to take that to the SQL standard. I mean, there's just so many tools out there that speak SQL and not HighSQL that in itself is a challenge. And I mean, you talked about tools being the ones that are generating SQL. I think the vast majority of SQL in the world is generated by tools, things like Tableau, Excel, and other tools, right? So, I think that's one thing, and regardless of Badger Interactive, you have to take that to the SQL standard. And I think MapReduce and Hive are actually very good tools for batch processing. I think we have hundreds of companies that are using our distribution with those technologies and with a lot of success. So I wouldn't go stand up here and say that those tools aren't good for batch processing. I think what they're not suitable for is that query that's going to take 50 milliseconds or maybe a few seconds. They're just not designed for that, and that's why we're seeing these new technologies to address that use case.
So let me actually push the panel on this notion of interactivity. Everyone here is hot on the idea of building a SQL for interactivity, which loosely is defined as something where you expect answers back and forth. Well, if you take the whole class of BI tools, right, they have identified a very large sweet spot of queries where you want this kind of interactivity, roll up, fill down, pivot, all these operations. And for which they also have a nice UI metaphor. So you can have front end. That's someone who doesn't know SQL. And amazingly, there are people who don't know SQL. They can actually use it, right? So the question I have for you is this. If you take many of those systems, they are blazingly fast because there are many years of optimization with in-memory representations and the like. And with all due respect, none of the SQL stuff on Hadoop that you're talking about, including stuff that you're working on, it's not about any one or two particular. It's close to matching the performance of those BI tools when you're in that sweet spot, right? So what are your thoughts? What are the examples of interactive SQL that you're seeing customers demand that fall outside the big, rosy BI sweet spot? Justin?
Yeah, so I think when you look into how things have traditionally been done, you get a lot of pre-aggregations and sampling where you're looking at a narrower set of data rather than the full fidelity or all the data being available to you. And therefore, I can take more of that data system, put it into an optimized structure, and on the BI side, put it into in-memory caches to go and look at that. Perfectly fine for the really high-value data sets. Much more difficult if I'm trying to take advantage of all the data that is available to my enterprise. When I'm trying to not just look at a bought and sold transaction, but I'm trying to look at the user behavior as they navigated through my website or navigated through my store, or if you're looking in other industries, similar other metaphors there. That data volume starts now growing exponentially very quickly, and you can continue to try to find a system that can fit all your data in memory on the BI side, or try to go and pre-aggregate and load that into the summarized cube. But at some point, you're running up, you're trying to push a rock uphill. You're either running out of the capacity of a machine to be able to hold that much data, or you're also confining yourself due to process and overhead of trying to convert that into that structured format. The advantage of what you can do with SQL and Hadoop is I still get the advantage of a fully scalable HDFS file system underneath, and the value of interactivity is I can actually get interactive SQL against that raw data before I bring it into my operational store. And this isn't to say that those operational stores, such as the traditional data warehouses, go away. But it is to say that you can do the exploratory interactive analytics. When I'm trying to find the next diapers and beer analogy, I can do that directly against my raw data and don't have to surmise what subsets of my data am I going to pull into those specialized interests.
So is it only scalability?
Or
is it also the language surface? Because if you look at these BI tools, they are essentially translated to collections of group by queries, subsets of SQL. So much. You answer I pass as essentially scale dimension is one thing, right? But what about the language surface? Do you think that you need to go beyond the group by subset that you get from these BI content?
I'd say that there's actually three things as part of that. One is obviously scale, to be able to go to petabytes of information. Cost is a factor in that, but I'd sort of put them in a very similar bucket, that if I'm looking at storing petabytes of information for me to go on the floor, I don't want to do that at tens of thousands of dollars per terabyte. Well, I do want to do that for that high value data that I'm getting pinged over and over and over again. The last one, which actually is the most important in my opinion,